All right, Patty, we are live. This is Tim Blankenship and Patty Handy live answering your questions today. We're talking about divorced women and how to win with your money and your future. We're going to be talking about setting financial goals, creating a budget, understanding retirement accounts and investments, talking about establishing credit or maybe fixing your credit, maybe some career advancement and side hustles. Because trust me, if you get divorced, you're going to want to get a little extra money in there, maybe some insurance adjustments and estate planning that you want to address post divorce. So, Patty, how are you doing today, and where are we going to start?
I'm great, Tim. Thank you. That's a lot of good information there, a lot of topics. So we'll start wherever you want.
Let's start with the basics. I think that's what you said. Let's
Okay.
start with the basics.
Okay. So first and foremost, before we get into the mechanics of money and the mechanics of what you should do post divorce, one of the things I want to just really emphasize is that this is going to be a journey, and it's going to be a situation where you're going to be taking, 2 steps forwards, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, 5 steps forward. But it's going to be a positive projection and a positive movement forward. But be okay and give yourself grace when you do have those days where you're taking several steps back, because it always happens. And I experienced that myself when I went through my divorce, and that's just the nature of the beast. And then just take really good care of yourself. Really make sure that you are well, emotionally, mentally. Just spend that time making sure that physically you're healthy and well, because you can't make financial decisions or any kind of other decisions when you aren't feeling well. Again, physically, emotionally, mentally, you've got to be take that. If you're very newly divorced and just kind of coming out of the fog, give yourself some time and a chance to come out of that fog before you make any big financial decisions. You don't want to be making any kind of decisions when you are in the middle of emotional turmoil, because they will most likely be bad decisions. And I can speak from experience on that. Very shortly after my divorce, when things were just, insanity, I made some decisions that weren't, in the best interest. So.
And I think you've mentioned that before in prior conversations, that it's going to be a journey. And I think you even said, like, take a step back and don't jump into making decisions, I
Yes.
believe.
Yes. In case someone missed some of that. Yeah, I definitely encourage you to, especially when it comes to the finances and your money, give it some time before you make any big decisions. Don't, invest in products or, do something with your money, big movements, when you're in the middle of that turmoil. You just aren't in the right mind to make those decisions. Unless you're working with a financial advisor that you were working with prior to the divorce or prior to your husband passing, if that was the case, and you have that trusted person that they know you and they know your story, that's a different topic. But if you are just starting out, you don't have anybody that you're working with, just take your time. Don't be in a rush to put all that money to work if you don't understand what's happening.
Sounds good. So we're kind of on the financial topic. So let's talk about setting financial goals. Maybe some short term and long term. Can you break some down, Patty? Some short term goals folks should have, and maybe some long term goals, financial goals. We should be setting.
Yeah, so short term, I'm going to say make sure that you have a emergency fund set aside. Ideally, we always hear that 6 months. That's kind of the standard. That should be at least 6 months that you have for your living expenses set aside in cash. That's really and leave it in cash or a money market account. The other thing is really get a handle on your debt. If you're carrying any kind of debt, whether it be credit card or student loans or whatnot, have a plan in place to really attack that and address that. And then focus again short term on rebuilding your own credit. Make sure you have credit in your own name, and those joint accounts and joint whatever it is that you have that's joint, make sure that those are separated, if at all possible, without it, in having there be an implication to like the house or whatever. Obviously, you've got to refinance, but just try to get your own credit again in your own name, and then close what you can. That's joint. So that's the short term for sure.
Can I ask you a scenario on that before we get into the long term? So you're post divorce, you're coming out. Generally, most people are going to have a little bit less money because you're going from one or two incomes in one household to one or two incomes in two households, and the money's just not going to go as far.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that they're trying to do simultaneously: build an emergency fund, pay off debt, save for retirement. All of these things. Is there a way to? How would you prioritize those?
That's a very common question, and I get asked that a lot. So the answer is is yes. You want to do all. My initial thought is, and recommendation is pay off the debt and save a little bit. You can do both every month. Put a little bit towards both. The retirement can wait a little bit until you get out from underneath those two other issues, but don't just focus on paying down debt without that emergency fund. You've got to have that emergency fund in place. But the emergency fund is earning you, if you have a money market account as of today, you're earning mid fours. And if your credit card debt's 20%, obviously you want to get out from underneath that. So from a numbers perspective, it's the debt, but not at the expense of having some money in the bank as a, to fall back on. If going to work and you have a flat tire and you've got to pay for a new tire, you don't want to be adding more debt. You want to be able to take it out of that emergency account and have that for you.
Another, and kind of rolling into this, and I believe you mentioned this, is having a budget as well, right? Because you're going to have to look at your post-divorce finances and, maybe curtail some of them and
Yeah.
really budget, maybe not eat out as much. As I think those little things are killers, just going out to eat here and there, getting DoorDash and all that. Those little things can really add up when you compare that to a cost of just going to the grocery store and making a meal.
Huge. I actually had a client where and I might have shared this on a prior podcast, but for those that maybe missed that, I had a client who was just going through cash, couldn't figure out what was going on. We went through 2 months worth of statements, the bank statements and the credit card statements. And at the end of the day, we determined that he was spending $1,000 a month on fast food. And that was because he was on the road a lot with his kids who were in sports. So he was shocked, and it was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? So yes, absolutely. So my recommendation is put together a budget. I actually have a spending tracker I can send you if you want to reach out to me. I'm happy to send you that spending tracker. And it's an Excel spreadsheet that lists all the things, and you can add your own as well. And I also recommend you pull out, last 2 or 3 months worth of debit statements, your banking statements that shows your debit activity as well as your credit card activity, and then highlight in different colors the different make all groceries in yellow highlight, make fast food in pink highlight, make utilities, although utilities are standard and there's not really going to be, much necessarily variable, but it's a necessity that you don't have, any impact or any control of what those are. But if you have, Starbucks, or you have, going out with friends, put them in all different colors. And then that way you can kind of see from a quick glance, oh my gosh, I have a lot of going out with friends. This is really going to be this is going to be cut back. So yes, it's a great way for you to just quickly determine where the holes are in that boat so you don't sink.
And while you were talking about that, it reminded me of something. We cut the cord to cable a long time ago. I can't remember how long ago, but then we signed up for one streaming service, then the next streaming service. And I think we even had 2 accounts with like Netflix simultaneously that we didn't know in 2 different names. So I think, on top of looking how much fast food is, maybe look at paring down your streaming services. I think we, and we'll look at it and say, okay, we haven't turned on Hulu for 3 months. Why are we paying $15 a month for that? So I think there's at least $100 you could cut if you knocked off some of the streaming.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. And again, that's kind of the holes in the boat that I talk about. You can absolutely look at what you're spending and find those opportunities to stop that. And then you can turn around and use that savings and put that towards the credit card debt or towards that emergency fund. But yes, we can always, if we were, really honest with ourselves, if we were to look at everything, there's definitely money that was just, is being spent. And I want to just make the point too, that this is not a forever thing. I'm not telling you to watch your pennies every day, all day, forever, because that's just not life. We just can't live like that. However, when you're going through this divorce, when you're going through this transition period, and things are very tight, and you've got to have a really proactive plan, just know that right now you've got to do some things that may or may not feel a little bit comfortable or uncomfortable, but it's not the end all be all to the rest of your life. I mean, this is just a chapter in your life where you've got to, buckle down, get things back on track. And then when you're back on track, then you can, spread your wings a little bit and enjoy those other things that you had an opportunity to. But sometimes we feel like a budget is like a diet, it's so restrictive and it's just hard to maintain and sustain. But just know that it's not necessarily a forever thing.
Yeah. The part of the long-term notes I had were I guess it's short-term and long-term, but on a long-term perspective, talking about retirement, I think people are going to realize they're going to have to kick that into high gear on top of everything else, on top of having a budget, on top of paring back on things and so forth. They're going to really want to have to, especially if they were in a long-term relationship, really be aggressive with their retirement. What's your advice with that?
Yeah, it's going to depend on their situation for sure. But I mean, the number one thing is just max out your 401k. I mean, absolutely do what you can to max that out. If you have a Roth option within your 401k at work, I would say, I mean, I can't necessarily blanket statement say do the 401k option because there are some situations where a traditional makes more sense if you're a super high income earner. And it affects the tax, but overall, long-term tax-wise, a Roth is going to be better. So if you have that Roth option, I would choose that. If you can fund an outside, Roth IRA and you don't make too much because there's an income limitation when you fund a Roth, then certainly look at that. And then just put everything else on autopilot. Set up an automatic savings plan into a regular brokerage account if you've maxed out kind of your retirement stuff. Transfer whatever you can, $100 a month, 200, 500, whatever it is that you can, into a brokerage account of some kind, and just make it automatic. That's going to be the game changer for you. Just set it up once, and it'll just automatically transfer from whatever account you want to your investment account. And that just, it's a beautiful way to get that done automated. And if you do that, you'll realize you're saving money. If you do that first, you're not waiting to pay all your bills and then save. That's human nature. We pay all of our bills and then we save whatever's left, and that's backwards. We need to save first because we can always find ways the money will go, right? But if the money's not there at the end of the day, we might say no to that dinner out with a friend, or we might say no to something else. But that savings got to be first and foremost.
So what does that look like? Can you break down a little bit more detail how that would work? So you need to save X, and then with the rest of it, that's where you'd create the budget, go with the must pays, and then with if there's anything left over, that's what you'd use for eating out or the little bit of extras. How do you advise your clients on that?
So the spending tracker that I have, savings is the first line item. So I have that first. Now you might have to go back and fill that in, but if you're honest with yourself and you go, okay, here's my utilities, here's the food, here's the necessities to make my house run. This is what that costs. Then you look at that and you look at, okay, what am I bringing home? And you look at the difference and you say, okay, I've got this much positive cash flow, and I can go to dinner, I can buy a gift, I can do, whatever it is that you've got on your other line items. But the saving should be very, very first and foremost above going out with your friends, running to Starbucks, doing some of those extracurricular, those things that are, just extra for your life. So it's first and foremost, get a handle on what it costs to run your house, just to keep your roof over your head, feed your family, and just the bare minimums. That's what you've got to really get a good handle on.
Since you have the savings line item first on your spending tracker, how do you recommend what amounts they use? Is it like a percentage, or how is that amount determined?
Well, that's a good question. It's going to really depend on the situation. I mean, obviously it's going to, and it'll depend in what the time in your life. If you're just coming out of a divorce and, cash is super tight and you're just trying to get, yourself righted up from life, that might be a different number. So you might start off with $100 a month because you found out that, yes, you can swing that $100 a month pretty easily. And then as you, progress through life and you are getting a little bit more comfortable with your expenses and things are flowing a little better, you're earning a little bit more money, you've got a side hustle or whatever the case is, then I would increase that to 150 or 200 or whatever it is that you can do comfortably. But push that envelope a little bit because you can probably save more than you realize. And the nice thing about it is if you set that up, you can always go back and change it. So I'm just going to use this as an example. If you go to Fidelity or Vanguard and you set it up where it's automatic on the 5th of the month and you're investing $100 a month, you can always go in there online and just stop it anytime you want or change the amount whenever you want. It isn't like you're stuck with that figure or stuck with that date or anything. It's up to you to do whatever you want. And you have full control over that. But the dollar amount is going to really depend on, doing that hardcore analysis of what's coming in, what's going out, and what is truly what is truly extra. And it might be that right now, depending upon your situation, there is nothing extra. And you've got to just come up with that once you go through those calculations.
You mentioned the word side hustle. I imagine you would encourage that. I'll preface this with saying the clients that I help that are going through divorce, the question is, should I get a job or do I need to get a job? I'm going to be getting spouse support perhaps. And I'll tell them that because there's this misunderstanding that with spouse support, that if you're getting $1,000 in spouse support and then you earn 1,000, that 1,000 goes away. It doesn't work that way. It's kind of like on a credit basis comparison to an algorithm between the different amounts of income. So if you earn 1,000, it doesn't wipe out the 1,000 you were getting. I always tell my clients, you're going to want to work because the spouse support is not going to be enough, even if it's close to 50%, post tax of the solo earner. Let's say in this case, you're still going to want to work. You're still going to be better off financially. And that's another way of getting ahead. Because there's a saying, and I don't know if I'm going to butcher it, but that you can only save so much to wealth, but to your income is your greatest tool.
Yes. Yes. In fact, I was just seeing a post from Barbara Cochran, of all people, from Shark Tank. And she was saying she's never saved to her millions. It's always been investments. It's always been ideas. It's always been work, income in some capacity. It wasn't like she was super aggressive in savings. So, yeah, I'm kind of of the mindset. It's sort of a little, it's a little of both. It's you're saving. I mean, you definitely need to be mindful of your saving and in your investing. But your income source, the ability for you to create outside cash flow, especially today with the internet and the opportunities, even the work at home, remote, that are part-time. I mean, there's just opportunities everywhere. So yes, I love side hustles. And if you can do, again, another few $100 a month, you throw that down in your credit card debt if that's what you have, or throw it into your savings account, or you have a little more fun. You can do with it what you want.
For sure. And you mentioned credit in that discussion there. That we've talked about that quite a bit on. I think we had an entire podcast on that, but maybe we could hit the high level topics on credit cards, because that's going to fall into the budgeting. You obviously don't want to overspend. If you do end up out of the divorce and you do have credit card debt, you're going to want to pay that off. And we also talked about in the past about how if you had joint accounts, you may have seen your credit score drop because of dropping off as a authorized user.
Yeah, well, if you have the credit history is 15% of your score. So if you are closing that a card out that you used to have with your husband or wife, and it's now off your credit report, that history is gone. So yes, your scores will be impacted, shortly. But as you get your own credit and you rebuild it and you use and pay, you'll rebuild that up, relatively quickly. The really tough part is that you have to close those accounts out. There's no way around it. You don't want to keep joint credit cards open. I mean, that's just not a good idea. There's always nuances. If you own a business and their business cards or whatever, that's, different conversation. But you really want to have your own cards and separate those out. So yeah, be mindful of that. And then do your best to absolutely, I mean, obviously we want you to pay it off in full every month, but if you're carrying credit, don't just make the minimum payment. You will never, it'll be a very long time and just so much more money that you're wasting on interest if you just pay the minimums. So do what you can to really attack that. Have a plan in place to just aggressively attack that.
Yeah. And credit cards, what are the interest rates on those these days? Like 28, 30%?
It's going to depend on your credit score.
It's pretty crazy.
They're in the 20s. It's going to depend on your credit score for sure. If you have a great score, obviously your rate will be lower. And that's why your credit score is so important, because the interest rate on everything is based off of that. And you can save or make, thousands of dollars more if you have a better credit score. So super, super important. Yeah, we did a whole episode on that. I would definitely recommend those to check out that other episode. We went into great length as to what the credit cards are made out of, are made up as far as the components and how to really keep that score up.
Let's jump into insurance and things that people need to look at as far as adjustments and changes, and we can break it down kind of health, life, and auto. I had a very interesting conversation with the gentleman that handles our auto and life insurance policies, John Gardner. He's out here in Santa Clarita. We did a podcast with him a few weeks ago, and I have some interesting facts I could share on auto insurance because we talked a lot about that. But when it comes to health insurance, I mean, once you're post divorce and the 6 months have run and you're no longer married, you're no longer a dependent, and you're out. If you were not the one with the health insurance, you're now looking at getting a health insurance policy, and that comes obviously at a cost, and that's obviously a big concern for people.
No doubt, no doubt. And insurance is crazy expensive. You've got to have it. And it is, I mean, there's no way around it. There's no shortcut to it. Um, Covered California, if you're in California, jump on that site and do the calculations and see what you come up with. But yeah, it's really tough. And you talked about the auto insurance. I'll share a recent conversation that I had with my insurance agent, and it might be very similar to what you had. She was saying, she actually called me and she's like, I hate to tell you this, but your car insurance is going to go up about 20% at the end of the year when your policy renews. I'm like, why? I haven't had an accident. I haven't had a ticket. What the heck, And it's because, well, a lot of California, they're stop writing in California. And because there are so many individuals who are driving without insurance, unfortunately, and there's no consequence apparently. And I'm not the insurance expert, so I would disclose that, talk to your insurance agent about this. But what she was saying was that because of the uninsured motorists out there, the insurance companies having to pay out for these uninsured motorists, and there are so many more claims. She's saying that she's getting more and more claims. People are more distracted. They're texting. They're not paying attention. They're whatever. So there's a lot of fender benders. There's a lot more accidents. And so these insurance companies are just oodling out the cash. And so us who pay the insurance, we're going to be the ones kind of absorbing that. So I don't know if that was the conversation that you had with John, but.
So we did talk about the increases. That was new to me about why it's going up. I know there was an increase across the board, like there was an approval where they could raise it up to 3 or 4 or 5% additional. So of course they went to almost to the max for that reason, and I'm assuming that reason, and because of a lot of auto insurance companies or insurance companies in general getting out of the market, specifically in California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the things that came up that I thought was interesting is because we were having a play on it with divorce as well, as far as auto insurance, and he said that when you separate, so even if you don't get divorced and you live in different households or different house in general, you've moved out, that technically you need to have a separate insurance policy because the insurance policy is being written on where you live, where the car is being stored, and so forth. And that technically you shouldn't, especially if it's a different city or a county, because the policy would be different. And his example was if someone lived in Santa Barbara, it's going to be less expensive than in LA County. So that it's kind of insurance fraud, if you will. Not that that's something that they would necessarily catch you doing, but that technically living in the household, or different households rather, is kind of a technicality where you need to get separate policies, not just when you get divorced.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I like I said, I'm not an insurance agent, but I mean that makes sense. The different counties cost different amounts, and if you're not together, then yeah, most definitely. But it's crazy. I mean, the California market is certainly getting crazy high.
So life insurance, I think, what would be a recommendation there? We need to probably change our beneficiaries at that point when you go through divorce.
So, most definitely change your beneficiaries. The other thing, if there's, and this is something that you probably want to talk to your attorney about, but if you have, child support and you've got the spousal support and there's nothing in place for any type of, if your husband or your wife, whoever's paying that support, if they pass away, you've got to make sure that child support's covered. So get a simple term life insurance policy out with you as the beneficiary to make sure that you get paid out what you need to continue to raise your children and support that situation. So that's a conversation for an attorney, and that calculation's kind of that part of that conversation. But just be mindful of that. I'm sure that's come up with, if you are going through a divorce, that's come up in conversation, but definitely do that. And then if you have, if you're responsible for children, you should have it on your own life as far as insurance go. I personally like the simple, straight, term life. It's least expensive. It's the easiest thing. I don't love, and I'm probably going to get a little slapping for this, but I don't love the products where there's intermingled of investment and insurance in one product. I'm mindful of do the term life insurance that's more efficient, and then invest your assets, however you want to, in funds, and index funds are going to be a lot less expensive than some of these other products.
Yeah, you're actually reiterating what the life insurance agent I spoke. He does all kinds of insurances, John, but he basically said exactly what you said. Do a life policy, term policy specifically. He said, we've had a couple of clients just this week get term policies to cover spouse support. It's up to them to do it, but it is part of a fact sheet that I send out when clients hire me for their divorce. Excuse me. In that, if one income is dramatically higher than the others, or the amount of spouse support being paid is fairly significant, or for a long period of time, to the point where loss of that, loss of life, and then therefore cancellation of spouse support would put that person literally into poverty, that they should look at getting a term policy to cover that. And it's pretty, in talking to John, he gave a pretty simple calculation of doing that. His recommendation was, in the example I had given him, I said, what would you recommend for a term policy for someone that's paying, excuse me, $1,000 a month for 10 years? So it's $120,000. He said, yeah, that's exactly how I do it. We'd write a term policy, 10-year term for $120,000. And the reason I asked him that is I said, do you think that's better or worse than writing a step down type policy where year one, it's for 120,000, year two, just to cover those dropping rates? And his advice was not to do that, because if over those 10 years, if there's a change in your health, in covering, when you get that term policy on any other year after the first year, that's could dramatically impact the cost. And I thought that was great advice.
That's a really good point, because once you're locked in that term policy, you're protected from having any kind of physical exams and whatnot. So I would absolutely agree with that.
So that covers all the insurance issues. What about estate planning? I know in your course you cover addressing that, right?
Yeah. So, I'm not an estate planning attorney, but I basically go over the importance of having an estate plan and having the what exactly that looks like. And people have this notion that if you need an estate plan only if you have a large estate, if you have a lot of assets, and that's not true, because within the estate plan is not only your living trust and your will, but it's also the medical directive and the power of attorney. So if you have certain wishes with your body, if you were to be in an accident, you couldn't speak for yourself, who has the right to speak for you? Who has the power of attorney to deal with your investments if you aren't able to? Some of those things have to be, known and documented, and that's all part of the estate, plan. And then, especially if you've got a divorce situation, there's many moving parts to that. And I personally, I'll share my personal situation, and this might help somebody. I recently redid mine. I did mine when my son was young, but I redid it recently. And I was speaking with my attorney, and I said, okay, what happens if I pass away, and then my son gets everything, and then he passes away and he's not married yet? What happens to the money then? And he goes, well, it would go to his next of kin, which would be his father. I'm like, well, no. We're not going to have my ex-husband get my my assets, so we need to change that. So it's that kind of conversation that will happen with an attorney, where if you want specific instructions, if this then that, if this then that, and you go through these different rabbit holes, but at least it's all addressed and it's all what your will is, because otherwise it might be that something like that happens. If it's not documented, all of your assets might go to your spouse when in fact that's not what you wanted. So that's where the beauty of an estate plan comes into place. You don't have to have, a huge portfolio and lots of assets. It's really peace of mind, and it's worth the investment for sure.
I think you preach. I think we've made it clear we do not specialize in any of these things. I mean, you
Yeah.
specialize in being a financial coach. I specialize in handling amicable divorce. But in both of what we do, we the parties need a team of specialists. They need the financial planners. They need estate planners. They need an insurance agent. They need all these people to help them navigate this process. And I know you preach that as well through your coaching, your programs, and so forth. And you have the referrals to those experts and can guide them when going through this process you put them through with your Minding Her Money training, that it will reveal these needs that you can then say, here's 2 or 3 resources for this, 2 or 3 resources for that. And this kind of leads me into the next thing I want to talk about is education and personal development. This all falls under that. What you are doing is that personal development coming out of a divorce. Maybe they hadn't handled the finances before, learning to deal with a budget and all of that. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, I am just a huge proponent, and I'm trying to create this movement where, yes, education, empowerment, confidence, feeling stable and secure, feeling comfortable with managing your money. I keep saying that, my mission is to create badass money managers, for women to create, or badass women money managers. And it does come down to education. It comes down to, as you said, the personal development, the personal growth. We're all on this journey. We are all growing and learning. If we're not moving forward, we're moving backward, but we're always moving. And I think that if we take a proactive approach and not fear money or fear investing, feel overwhelmed, feel frustrated, and we take that mindset of, what, I can learn this, and you can learn this. It's not hard to understand the mechanics of money. It's so important to understand so many pieces of your financial house, not just your investing. So yes, the personal development, like I said, we're all on this journey. We are all growing together. We're all moving forward together, and enjoy that. Kind of look at that as an opportunity just to step into your greatness and step into your best self, and embrace that. I think that's really important. And yes, to your point, I absolutely do not give advice. I will refer to a financial advisor. I will refer to a estate planning attorney, insurance agent, CPA, whatever the case might be, depending upon their needs. I got to be really careful, that we don't overstep that, for sure. And I do have a list for all those individuals.
I think we really delivered on what we set out to discuss today. I thought we would need 2 hours when I was first bringing it up, but we
probably
knocked
could
it out in 33 minutes. Did I miss anything, or do you have any parting words?
I would say, this is kind of random, and this is off our topic a little bit, but not really. We talked about insurance and health and whatnot. One of the things that I'm going to recommend is to, and this is for men or women, is to go get a physical. Go to the doctor, get a physical, get all your blood work up, and just know that you're okay health-wise. I remember when I went through my divorce, my biggest fear was like something happening to me and I couldn't be here for my son. And he was so little, and I thought, oh my gosh, I got to make sure I'm okay. Now I might be a little bit wackadoodle, and that's okay. that's probably me. But going to the doctor, getting a physical, getting all that blood work done, and just knowing that you're well puts you in a place of, okay, physically, mentally, or physically, I'm healthy, and that's good. Now I'm going to move forward and deal with these other things, and you deal with those things. Because if you don't have your health, you won't have your wealth, and you won't have anything else. You've got to deal with that health first. So I know it's kind of a silly thing, nothing to do with finances, but it really does. It's like, without our health, we don't have anything else. So just make sure that you are in a good place physically.
I think that actually was the most important thing we could have talked about today, to be honest with you, about getting a physical, because of this. We've had clients call us and say, Tim, can we stall or stop the divorce or drag it out my wife just got a cancer screening and has to have surgery, or
Mm,
my husband just had XYZ happen and the surgery can't happen for 6 months and he won't have, or she won't have insurance
mm,
after. So when
wow.
you said that, I was like, okay, yeah, you're going to get a divorce. If you know you may be without health insurance for a time, go get a physical, go get a full blood panel, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever you do to see if there's anything that you may need health insurance for. So if there is a gap, it's not going to be something, and that ties directly into what we're talking about as far as finances, I think, because that's come up several times over the 10 plus years I've been doing this.
I think that is huge, and we oftentimes don't think about that because we're so wound up in the emotional side of it. We're so wound up in splitting things up and, trying to find a new place to live and some of that. But yes, absolutely 100% get your and we should be doing it every year, and we often are just so busy with life that we don't do
Yeah.
that every year. But yeah, if we do that and then we catch something early if you happen to find something, and if not, you have peace of mind, and there's nothing better than, peace of mind knowing you're healthy and strong and doing well. Speaking of, being healthy and strong, I'll share another story since we didn't go the hour. Um, One of the other things that I would recommend is to, among the madness of your days, find something, if at all possible, that you do that is just pure fun, that allows you to take that brain break and turn off the stress, turn off the anxiety and the just the responsibilities of life. And funny story. So when my son was about 3, I put him in Mighty Mites, which was, martial arts for little itty bitty kids. And I loved watching him. It was a lot of fun. And I decided to um, try it myself. And so I obviously joined the adult side, and although I should have been in the Mighty Mites, but I did the adult side, and I was loving it. It was fantastic. I loved it because I was on the mat and I was so preoccupied with my form and what he was teaching and just everything, and I was sweating, and it was just God. It was such a great brain break. I felt so, although I was physically just beaten up, I felt kind of just my mind was relaxed. It was a beautiful thing. And then I got to my yellow belt and I was all proud of myself and I was doing really well. And then we started doing like flipping and the throws and this and that. And I enjoyed it, but I was like, you know what? If I get hurt, if I break a bone, if I do something, I'm in trouble. I can't take care of my little one by myself with the broken arm or whatever. So I ended up stopping, which is kind of a bummer, but I loved it. And I found that to be such a great thing. But when I took a painting class, but I still was thinking, about stuff. I was doing something else. I always be thinking. But a sport like that, you can't not think about what you're doing, otherwise you get hurt. And so, find an outlet, find something that's fun, and that just helps part of the journey.
Well, that falls into the financial side as well. If you get hurt, you can't work, or you get permanently injured, and that definitely will impact your finances. So yeah, you got to start thinking about those things. I wrote down exercise.
Yeah.
You're talking about health. You want to start exercising. I interviewed a dating coach yesterday. It was one of the
Oh,
most fun conversations I've had, and also,
I should
I
listen into
guess,
that one.
yeah,
I should listen into that one.
and I guess scary too for those that are going through a breakup and whatever relationship, married or otherwise. Just yeah, I have to get that out there because it was fascinating just what's out there as far as dating apps and the casual sex and the non-commitment to relationships. And
Mm.
it doesn't, and essentially she did not paint a good picture for what's out there on the other side. So I know, like,
Oh
for
dear.
my, huh?
Oh dear.
Yeah, no, it didn't. She did not paint a good picture of what's out there. So I think, I talk about divorce 20 times a day on my videos and podcasts. So I think I'll get some good traction on giving dating, not me giving dating advice, but this dating coach who wrote a book and apparently
Hmm.
is very successful in helping people reintegrate into dating after long-term relationships.
Wow, I wonder if some of that advice could be sort of factored into a married couple, so they start dating again each other, to prevent the divorce in the first place.
Well, that's what some of, and I feel like, because we're on that pod match, I'm
Right.
doing I'm interviewing a lot of folks kind of in your world, marriage coaches, therapists of different varieties. And the a common theme is exactly what you just said. If you don't change your ways, you're going to end up in the same relationship with a different person. Why not just find out what it is you're
Mm,
doing that's causing this, or change your ways with the spouse you've already invested all this time and energy into?
yeah. I always say that, let's see, how is it? Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, it's
So
just that I was telling everyone, I feel like I'm getting free marriage counseling, free therapy, free financial advice. I mean, just been the benefit of doing these interviews with people.
that's fantastic. That's a
Yeah.
win-win-win, right?
I'll
Everybody
pretty soon I'll
benefits.
be able to put myself out of business.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's that dating coach. I'll have to um, tune into that one. Although if it's not good news,
It's just it's not that it's bad news, it's just not what
yeah,
how it was
yeah,
back in our day. Put it that
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can attest to that.
Yeah.
That's a different conversation. And that's probably off air.
Yeah, right. For sure.
Oh dear.
Well, this has been a great talk. We covered a lot. I think a lot to be learned from people checking in and watching this.
Yeah. If any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If anybody wants that spending tracker that I mentioned, happy to email it. Just reach out to me via social. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. That's my primary places.
Under Patty Handy, or
Yes.
yep,
So yeah, Facebook is just Patty Handy. Patty's an I, Handy's a Y, and same for Instagram. It's Patty.Handy, and LinkedIn is just Patty Handy.
perfect. And your course is Minding Her Money?
Minding Her Money. Go to mindinghermoney.com and you can download the roadmap to the program and watch a short training there. Um, Happy to assist or answer any questions.
All right, Patty. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, bye.
Bye.